friends with a man named Harlan de Groot, who is watching a movie in his car at a park. He is accompanied by his girlfriend, who keeps mocking him. Enraged by her ridicule, Harlan slams her face against the car dashboard. The commotion is overheard by another man who is also watching the movie in the park. Afterward, a man tried to defend Harlan's girlfriend, which led to a fight. Unfortunately, he was brutally beaten by Harlan. Meanwhile, in another place, Russell Bays was working at a steel mill in Pennsylvania. On his way home, Russell noticed his brother Rodney Bays Jr.'s car parked outside the racetrack. He stopped, got out, and walked toward him. At that moment, Rodney had just lost a horse race bet. Seeing this, Russell wondered where his brother got the money to gamble. Rodney admitted that he had borrowed it from John Petty, a loan shark who owned a bar and was involved in illegal business. Russell was upset that his brother was in debt just to gamble, but he couldn't bring himself to scold the only brother he deeply cared for. The next day, Russell visited his bedridden father, who was being cared for at home by his uncle, Red Bays. There, he also met Rodney, who turned out to be a soldier about to be deployed to Iraq. After seeing his father, Russell went to meet John, the loan shark who had lent money to his brother. As Russell was about to enter John's room, he found John with a visitor speaking in a threatening tone. That visitor was Harlan. Russell walked in without permission, which annoyed Harlan when Russell called him out. Afterward, Russell handed John his monthly paycheck to pay off part of his brother's debt and promised to cover the rest with his next salary. However, Russell asked John to keep his actions a secret from Rodney. After that, he stayed at John's bar for some drinks before heading home. That night, Russell drove while intoxicated. The streets were empty. Suddenly, a car came down from an incline and stopped across the road. It was too late for Russell to brake, and he crashed straight into the vehicle. Unfortunately, inside the car Russell crashed into were a mother and her young child. When he got out to check, he was devastated to discover that both had died in the accident he caused. The tragedy led to Russell serving 8 years in prison. While Russell was in prison, Rodney often visited him, but Russell's girlfriend, Lena Taylor, never showed up. Rodney explained that he was about to be deployed to Iraq and might not be around for a long time. Years later, Rodney finally returned after completing his military service. During a visit to his brother, he shared the news that their father, who had been ill for a long time, had passed away. Russell was heartbroken when he heard this. Now, Rodney was the only family Russell had left. Eventually, Russell was released from prison. On the day of his release, Rodney came to pick him up. The first place Russell visited was his parents' grave. After that, he wanted to see Lena. It was then that he finally understood why she never visited him in prison. Lena now had a new boyfriend, a police chief named Wesley Barnes. Russell could only watch Lena and her new boyfriend from a distance. The story then shifts to the lives of the two brothers after the hardships Russell had endured. Sometime later, Russell returned to his old job at the steel mill in Pennsylvania, while Rodney was caught taking part in an illegal fight. During the match, Rodney seemed to struggle against his opponent. Rodney was knocked down several times and took heavy blows. However, everything changed when his opponent insulted his mother. Consumed by rage, Rodney seemed to gain new strength and eventually won the fight. It turned out that he had joined the illegal match only to pay off his debt to John. John believed Rodney was not suited to be a fighter because he couldn't control his emotions, so he advised him to follow his brother's path and work at a steel mill. But with his face bruised and still feeling dizzy, Rodney ignored the advice. Meanwhile, Russell was waiting at home for Rodney to return and was surprised by his condition. However, he didn't ask further about what had happened. Rodney went straight to his room and showed no desire to talk. The next morning, while cleaning up the leftover food from breakfast, Russell found a bandage in the trash. He immediately confronted Rodney and advised him to stop getting into fights. Russell advised his brother to work at a steel mill. The pay might not be as high as being a soldier, but at least it was enough to live on. However, this advice angered Rodney. He said he no longer cared about life. Then he pointed to the scars he had from serving in Iraq, and argued that serving his country had only left him depressed, as he had witnessed too many war victims die before his eyes. Moreover, after returning, he no longer felt the comfort of a good life. In the afternoon, Rodney went to John's bar and begged him to let him join a fight to pay off his debt. At first, John was hesitant because the fights were risky and the organizers were notorious for cheating. However, since Rodney insisted, John eventually agreed. After that, John called Harlan to arrange for Rodney to take part in the next illegal fight. Meanwhile, Russell met Lena and pleaded with her to give their relationship another chance. But Lena refused, especially since she was pregnant with Wesley's child. The two embraced in tears, and Russell tried to let her go. After meeting Lena, Russell went to the site of the old accident where he had crashed into another car. He placed a wreath in memory of the victims. The next day, he met his Uncle Red, who used to take him hunting in the woods. Though tired, Russell accepted his uncle's invitation. Meanwhile, Rodney and John went to see Harlan, who looked down on Rodney's fighting skills because his build and appearance did not resemble that of a fighter. When Rodney heard Harlan's taunts, he became furious and challenged him to prove he was strong enough to fight in an illegal match. Fortunately, John stepped in and settled the conflict. Afterward, John pulled Rodney aside for a talk. He told him to throw the upcoming fight because that was the agreement he had made with Harlan. Rodney stayed silent, still angry at Harlan, and had not yet decided whether to follow through or not. A short while later, Rodney's fight began. Fueled by rage, he attacked fiercely and dominated his opponent. Seeing this, John sternly reminded Rodney to follow the agreement and throw the fight. Rodney eventually obeyed, offering no resistance as his opponent struck him. However, the beating became so brutal that John was forced to step into the ring to save Rodney. After the fight, Harlan met John and told him that his job was done since he had won the bet on Rodney's match. They then headed home. John felt relieved, thinking he wouldn't have to deal with Harlan any further. But he was wrong. On the way, Harlan and his men blocked the road, forcing John's car to stop at the end of the bridge. Harlan then walked up to the vehicle. When John saw Harlan, his phone accidentally slipped under the car seat and connected to the bartender's voicemail. Then Harlan leaned through the window, came close to John's face, and told him it wasn't over before shooting him dead. He ordered his men to drag Rodney to a warehouse. That night, after returning from a hunting trip, Russell walked into Rodney's room. He found a letter. In it, Rodney apologized to Russell for not listening to his advice to stay away from fights. He promised this would be his last battle, and that afterward he would work in a metal factory. At the same time, Rodney was being tortured by Harlan's men. When Harlan entered the warehouse, he forced Rodney to look directly at him. However, Rodney mocked Harlan by calling him a coward. His insults enraged Harlan, who immediately shot him dead. Afterward, Harlan ordered his men to bury Rodney's body in the forest. The next day, Wesley came to Russell's house. At first, Russell thought he was there because of his past relationship with Lena. However, Russell's assumption was wrong, because Wesley had come only to deliver the news that John had died in the forest. Later, at the police station, Russell was played a voice recording of John just before his death. It turned out that John's final moments had been accidentally captured in the bartender's voicemail. However, the police struggled to locate Rodney, who had been with John at the time of his death. Although the police questioned those who were present at the fight, no one was willing to speak. This made Russell extremely frustrated. He even accused Wesley and the police of failing to handle Rodney's disappearance. Later, Russell and his uncle went to John's office to look for Harlan's address. The bartender Russell met there said he didn't know Harlan's address, but he did know the location of the fight. During the investigation, Russell discovered that John owed Harlan a large sum of money and planned to repay it through a fight deal. Immediately, Russell and his uncle went to the site of the brawl, but no one was there. That night, Russell went to a parking lot and pretended to buy drugs from Harlan's men. At first, they refused to deal with him, suspecting he was an undercover cop. But eventually, they took him to Harlan's headquarters. However, because there were too many people there, Russell couldn't identify Harlan. This meant his mission was almost certain to fail. While driving with his uncle, Russell was stopped by a local police officer. The officer said he had received orders from Wesley, telling Russell to leave the area immediately. He also warned that these people were known for making their own rules and being hostile toward outsiders. The police escorted Russell and his uncle out of the area. If they refused, they would be arrested. Left with no choice, Russell and his uncle obeyed and went home. A few days later, Wesley was waiting for Russell at the factory gate after work. There, he informed him that the police had found Rodney's body buried in the forest. Hearing this, Russell tried to stay calm and appear strong. That evening, Wesley and Lena visited Russell's house to offer their condolences. Lena urged him not to investigate Rodney's death on his own and to leave the case to the police. Months passed as Russell tried to live a normal life. Although the police raided Harlan's house, his whereabouts were still unknown. After months of waiting in vain, Russell finally decided to take matters into his own hands. He sneaked into John's office to look for information about Harlan. There, he found Harlan's phone number and called him right away. Russell arranged to meet him at the bar where John's office was and claimed he would pay off the rest of John's debt. That night, Harlan arrived with one of his men. He carried a large bag and entered the bar from the back street. Russell, who had been lying in wait, quickly moved to the bar's entrance with a gun in his hand. Inside, Harlan threatened and interrogated the bartender, demanding to know who had called him. The bartender, who knew nothing, was shot dead by Harlan. Russell managed to trap Harlan's men in another room and prepared to shoot him. But Harlan fired heavily, forcing Russell to take cover. When Harlan tried to escape outside, he found that his car wouldn't start because it had been sabotaged. With no choice, he abandoned the car and fled into an abandoned factory. Russell chased after him, and the two engaged in a fierce shootout. Russell hit Harlan in the leg, but he still managed to stay on his feet. Russell then forced Harlan to walk into the woods. From a distance, Wesley appeared and told Russell to stop. But Russell ignored the warning. When Harlan tried to walk away, Russell shot him from behind. In the final scene, Russell is shown sitting alone in his house. After killing Harlan, Russell was not sent to prison because Wesley defended him and arranged for his acquittal. The film shows that gambling does not bring wealth. Instead, it leads to tragedy and can even cost lives. Endless debts, borrowed just for pleasure, pushed Rodney into despair. Gambling never helped him pay off what he owed. Sometimes, even a low-paying job is better, because at the very least it keeps us out of trouble, even if it doesn't make us rich.